Welcome to Digital Dudes. We're not going to introduce ourselves tonight. Tonight,
No.
we actually have a legend in the building. I would
Yes.
say almost a childhood dream coming true tonight.
Yes. It definitely
A
is.
hardcore legend, one of my favorite brands, ECW.
Same
Chris,
here.
oh, let me,
I, 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 I am 38 years old, and yes, I'm gonna act like Wayne. I'm not worthy. I'm not
not
worthy.
worthy.
I'm not worthy. We
Oh,
suck.
oh, but ready, Chris, ready to introduce our main guest tonight's
Yes.
episode. A member of the BWO, the
And the
one,
job squad.
oh yes, and the one, the only Blue Dust.
Blue,
Wait,
blue,
Blue Dust and the great, the only Blue Meanie
blue
is in the
meanie.
house, everybody.
You're too kind. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No
Uh,
problem.
Thank you for time. Thank you for your time. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
You're
Oh yeah.
welcome.
Means a lot. So
Yes.
I don't know if any of it's true, but I'll take it. I'll,
Oh no, it's
You're a
all
legend in
true.
our eyes.
All true.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, very welcome, man. I actually met you at the Green Day show in Philly.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Very cool. Very
I,
cool.
I was like, some dude came up to me. He's like, he saw the hat. And he was like, hey, yo, Meanie's over there. I'm like, I was telling my girl, I'll be back.
Yes.
Walked right over there. What a
That was
very
a
nice
great
guy.
show, man. That was a great show. That was Mrs. Meanie's birthday too, so it was a dual purpose going to see Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, and celebrate my wife's birthday. So it was
Oh,
awesome. That was
that's
good to see
nice.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. I was about to say,
And
but
you
go
want
ahead, Chris. No,
so
you.
I overstepped.
Talk amongst yourselves.
um, I was like saying, did like a lot of people came up to you, or didn't like kind of like it was low key? The people who knew.
Dude, I always say this. It's like anytime I'm out and about, like last weekend, last Sunday, we went to make Metallica at Lincoln Financial Field. It's like I always say, it's like I'm running for mayor. Just walking around Philly. It's kind of like Rocky without all the running. It's very cool. I'm right here in the heart of ECW land. 2300 Arena is 10 minutes that way, 15 minutes if I walk backwards. Um, but just it's cool. It's cool. That night, yeah, there was a smattering of but I always appreciate, people remembering, there's so many wrestlers out there, and the
Yes.
fact that, people remember means I must have did something right. So I always appreciate it.
You definitely did. I grew up watching you. I was excited, and I always did this in high school, and everyone's like, "What's that? The meanie dance."
Talk about a dance that was like a happy accident. Paul Heyman asked me if I could dance, and you know, I was always taught in wrestling, always say yes. Unless it's something you really shouldn't say yes to, just always say yes. Like, oh yeah, I can dance. In my head, I'm going, nope. But you know, um, went out there. There was evolutions to whatever that dance was. But yeah, became known as the dancer, even though like if I danced in real life, people would think I'm having a medical emergency. So the fact that people remember the meanie dance is it's pretty cool. The fact that it's made its way into video games, uh,
Yes.
you know, the action figures I've had are easily posable to the meanie dance. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty
I was
cool.
about to
Yes.
say, I understand that. I go to a lot of hardcore shows, and when people see me dance, it's like, do you need medical assistance, sir?
Do you need me to help you back into your chair?
Oh
You know,
yeah.
but yeah, I'm very, very fortunate that, that's the important thing about wrestling is, if you were going to wrestle somewhere and they showed your silhouette, would people know who it is just by your silhouette? And,
Hmm.
Yes.
it's, there's a lot of important things to wrestling, but just, just being recognizable and just doing things to stay in the public eye, is important.
Yes.
even if you're not in the ring, there's things you could do outside the ring to, keep yourself out there. So, you know, the fact that people come up to me and do the meanie dance or just do the pose, or when I'm at a convention, we do the pose, means the world because it was like I said, it was a happy accident, and it evolved over time, but just the fact that people remember it is awesome.
Yes.
That's pretty
And
cool.
we will be seeing you June 17th, no, June 14th in
14.
Springfield, Massachusetts. And we will be coming to get your autograph and all that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a dual purpose trip too. Mrs. Meanie's family's from Connecticut, so the night before we're going to go up and see her family, and then the morning of the show head up the rest of the way because her family's like an hour from Springfield. So, but that event's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes.
I can't wait for it actually myself. But I do gotta ask you. You're a Philly guy. You lived in Philly pretty much your whole entire life, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Jersey as a kid for a little bit, but that was against my will.
But
But
you claim Philly.
oh yeah, I've always
Yeah.
claimed Philly. Even when I lived in Atlantic City, I was a Philly guy at heart.
Yeah.
I knew where my heart, was.
I gotta ask you, where's the best steak? Philly cheesesteak.
That's a heated question.
I
Depending,
understand.
That
what.
that's a double trigger on that one, I have to say.
Speaking of, it's like cheesesteaks to people in Philly are like pizzas to people from Connecticut.
Yeah, true.
People in New Haven think they invented pizza, but in Philly, I always say you can go outside and throw a rock and hit a place with at least a decent cheesesteak.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I'm a 10-minute walk from Tony Luke's that way. John's roast pork over here is pretty good.
I go to gyms every time I go down there. South Street.
Jim's is
And
good too, man. Like
I hit them up.
when it comes to gyms, I might need two. Uh, but then they're respectable cheesesteak. Very good. Angelo's is a new favorite.
Yes.
On 9th Street because they bake their bread in house and for they bake their own bread and they bake their own pizza dough there. When they make their own dough when they do pizza there. I recently had one of those. A fan was kind enough to bring me one of those at a convention, and I was like, "Oh wow, let me try this." And the sign to a good cheesesteak is when you take a bite and you're chewing it. Does the cheese and meat take up every ounce of airway in your throat? To where you're like, "Ooh, I need water." Oh,
Yes.
yeah, just
I'm not gonna lie, that is me every time I go down there. I just devour it. My girl's like, she still has half of her, and I'm like,
yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
that was delicious.
Now,
Yes.
what is your cheesesteak order?
Oh,
I'm going to challenge you guys. What's your cheesesteak order?
Do you want to go first, Bobby?
yeah, because I'm very basic. This is the white girl of all of me. It is just with no onions, peppers. I hate onions. They're not good.
Right. Eh,
Yeah.
I'm not.
Me,
And
I
what?
would have to say a steak bomb with mushrooms, peppers, and all that in it, and some mayonnaise.
It's too much. Too much. Too much, buddy.
Mayonnaise might be a violation to some people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not
Yeah.
judging. I've done
Yeah.
it. I've put mayonnaise on in a drunken stupor, but just there's things you eat when you're drunk that make sense when you're drunk. But
Yeah.
for me, it would be give me a steak with sharp provolone and
Ooh.
fried onions and broccoli rabe.
Broccoli Rob?
Broccoli rabe is a my wife makes fun of me every time I say something. She makes me something to eat. I go, "Oh, that was a nice touch." But broccoli rabe is a nice touch on a Philly steak. Of course, in Philly we got the cheesesteak. We also got the roast pork sandwich, which is really
That
good.
is delicious. I'm not gonna lie there.
Yeah, you get broccoli rabe and sharp on roast pork. Now you're talking. But as far as cheesesteaks, that's my order. I love fried onion, raw onions, because you get get that smell off your hands. You know,
Yep.
Yeah.
that's brutal. But you know,
Yes.
you get some nice caramelized onions on there and sharp provolone and just for a little zing and some broccoli rabe. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of good places. There's Tony Luke's, John's Roast Pork Angelo's. There's Phil's up near 24th and Passyunk, maybe. They're really good. And then, there's a little corner store bodega around the corner from my house. They have amazing cheese. Like nobody ever talks about them, but I go in there and their cheesesteaks are. There's a foodie here who in the Philly area, a guy named J.L. Jupiter, and I watch his, because I watch his channel like it's porn, because it's all. So he showed the place. I was like, dude, that's right around the corner from my house. I went there, had a cheesesteak. I was like, this is fantastic. And it was affordable too,
Yep.
Have to take out a second loan or sell a kidney.
I think that was one of the most fast conversations we just all had on this episode. Is this Philly cheesesteaks
Yes.
are delicious,
Oh, dude, I'll talk.
and you
I'll
can go
talk food,
anywhere.
talk food. I'll talk sports, music, whatever.
Yes.
I
Um,
I'm a cook, so
There you
I
go.
do a lot of. I'm very fat and I love food.
and Bobby, I have to say you have lost the onion war in this episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to say this. I'm gonna admit that.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying. Look, I'm not going to judge because
He's not going to judge either, but that's going to be for another episode and all that. So
That's a strike
Yeah.
on me.
yeah.
ah,
Ah,
it's all good.
but
Look, I just turned 52, and I'm at the point where I pick my battles.
Yep.
If you tell me 2+2=5, you win. I don't give a shit. Just all right, buddy, just move along. But when I was 20 years old, I'm like, it's like I think of all the arguments I've had, over stupid shit, and it's just stupid trivial. Oh, Jim Stace is the best, or whatever.
yeah.
Mhm.
I picked the wrong. A lot of time, I picked the wrong hills to die on. With stupid subjects,
I think we always do that when we were younger.
Yes.
especially sports. Just
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm a
Stay
Bills
away from
fan.
sports big time.
yeah.
Yes.
But
I'm
we
all-
do have some. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. What are you saying?
Continue on.
Oh, I was about to say we do have some questions for you because
Oh,
some of them are like been eaten at the bits. The main one was I just want to know because you're a Philly guy, cheesesteaks. But
Yep.
of course.
me and Chris both have to ask. Chris, you want to ask that first question that we both agreed upon?
Yes. What gave you the idea of becoming the Meanie from Job Squad and Blue Meanie from Blue World Order?
I was just I got into wrestling in I started training in 94, and you're always like, man, who am I going to be? What am I going to be? You think wrestling, then you start training for wrestling, you realize you knew nothing about wrestling. And early on, I was like, what am I going to call myself? What am I going to do? And, Al, early on, I was the Zebra Kid, Brian Rollins, and just that was just for necessity. Me and Al took a trip out to this place called K&H, which stood for Carl and Hildegard. If you're in the wrestling business in the 90s, you got your wrestling gear from K&H, and you got your boots from B&A Boots in Arkansas. Bill Ash, he made everybody's boots. Him and a guy named Cliff Macias in Texas made everybody's boots. Cliff Macias made all of Ric Flair's boots. But we went to K&H, and I, going through the rejected bin, like just random stuff. I saw zebra, print, spandex and a singlet. I was like, I used to wear Zubaz. These look cool. And then, I was like, I could call myself Zebra Kid, not realizing there was already a Zebra Kid back in the day. But that's, you figure out a name. So I bounce around the indies.
Yeah.
And trying to find my way. And then, that's why I start running into Raven and Steve Richards on shows. And, there's a show in Baltimore, show in West Virginia and Pittsburgh. And I was on the show with Stevie and Raven, and they took a liking to me. And Raven had an idea for, Stevie Richards was his sidekick, his lackey. and they were trying to think of having an idea for Steve Richards to have his own lackey, so like a lackey to a lackey kind of thing. And they had a guy in mind, and the guy was this enormous guy. Guy made me look small, but he couldn't. He was a friend, but he couldn't wrestle or do anything. And they were watching me wrestle, and I was able to. I took inspiration from guys like Bam Bam Bigelow and trying to be the agile big guy. And I saw Bam Bam do a moonsault. I was like, let me try it. I always wanted to do a moonsault because of Great Muda, and then Bill DeMott did a pretty sweet moonsault. So when I got into wrestling, I started doing the moonsault. Like, and even if I didn't hit it, I do it where the opponent roll out of the way, miss, boom. So we're doing a show with Raven and Stevie, and it's like the third show in Pittsburgh. And I watch. I have my match, and then I was always taught to watch the rest of the show. So I was watching Raven's match, and he came through. And I was like, "Hey, man, I've really enjoyed your match." He went, "Hey, nice moonsault, kid." I was like, "Oh." So I was like, "Oh, he watched my match." So, um, that night we all stayed at the promoter's house, Norm Connors, who helped me and so many other wrestlers in the business. He helped me, he helped CM Punk. Um, we stayed at his house, and the next day we went out to lunch, and Raven was, pitching ideas like, "Hey, we had this idea for Stevie to, Stevie's character to have a lackey, so be a lackey to a lackey." I was like, he's like, "You want to do it?" I was like, "Oh, absolutely." He's like, "You're gonna have to wear half shirt and Daisy Dukes." I was like, "But I'll be in ECW, right?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I don't care." So, flash forward, I debuted in October, and that footage never aired. So in that next month, we did another show for Norm out towards Pittsburgh, and we're driving home in this blizzard. And Raven goes, "Hey, you ever see the movie, Yellow Submarine?" I was like, "Yeah, when I was a kid, you know, you know." And he's like, "Did you ever hear the, you remember the character, the Blue Meanie?" I was like, "Yeah, vaguely." He's like, "Well, you're gonna be the Blue Meanie, and you're gonna love it, and you're gonna want to paint your whole body blue, but just dye your hair blue." And I was like, "Bobby and ECW." I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." So we drove from, it was like a 6 hour drive back, and we went to Raven's house and crashed on his couch, and then woke up, and then went to the local Blockbuster, rented the Yellow Submarine, and me and Raven sat there and watched the Blue Meanie parts, and Raven started coaching me on how to be the Blue Meanie character. Meanwhile, he hasn't pitched it to ECW yet, but we're practicing it. And I'd be in the middle of the living room, he'd like, "Blue Meanie, do a promo on this, do a promo on that," and then in character, I would to do a promo. So he pitched it to Paul, and then I debuted at November to Remember '95. Uh, you know, went out, got the airbrush shirt, just like Steve. Steve was wearing a half shirt, so I went and got an airbrush shirt, Blue Meanie, and debuted. I'm the Stevie's fan in the crowd, and ironically, this is the same show Sabu came back to ECW. He had been fired for a little bit, and put on the Blue Meanie gear, go out in the crowd, and I'm under the strict instructions of the only wrestler you're to react for is Stevie Richards, or get excited or show interest in Steve Richards. All right, so I just sit there the whole show like this, just like grumpy cat, and I was under instructions. The only wrestler you get excited for is Steve Richards. Okay. Well, second thing of the night, is when they bring Sabu back. Paul Heyman comes out, does a little promo, says dim the lights come back on, Sabu's pointing, and the whole arena is going insane, cheering and, yelling and fist pumping. And if you look on the right hand side, there's just me and the crowd sitting there not reacting one bit because I was under strict instructions, only react for Steve Richards. So like this whole world is going, chaotic around me. I'm just sitting there like this. So that happens, and then Stevie's match happens. I hear his music and I perk up, and Stevie comes around. And I have a present for him. The box. He opens up the box. It's a half shirt that says "Flock of Seagulls." Because being an '80s fan, it's a great reference. Um, and he opens it up, puts it on, and we celebrate. And he brings me over to guardrail, which is very symbolic because I used to go to all the ECW shows, before I was in the business. And then when I got into wrestling, I would still stop by and check out, the events. But now here I am, a guy who used to sit in that crowd, and Stevie's bringing me over to guardrail is very symbolic, much like if I went to a Phillies game and they're like, hey, you want to take some swings? You want a couple at bats? Oh, all right. So, you know, the, basically, Raven gave me the character, and most of the, and he created a lot of the great characters. ECW created my character. He created the Dudleys. He brought in Beulah, I believe. And
Bueller.
there's a couple other people he tried to bring in ECW, but like Raven always had an eye for talent or creating talent or booking. He booked, a lot of his own, Paul trusted him to book a lot of his own stuff. And when it came to me, he gave me the character. And some of the times are the best characters are the ones you don't even think for yourself, but somebody sees that character in you. And, always hear, if somebody goes to WWE and if Vince wants to give you a character, the character's, going to get a good run. So, Raven came up with this character. Raven was one of the top stars in ECW.
Hmm.
He came up with a character for me to be a part of his flock or whatever. Oh, that was Raven's Nest. The
Yeah.
flock, I think it was WCW, but you know, he created that for me, an opportunity for me to be in his thing, which meant, I was going to get a lot of TV time, and
Yeah.
he created a character for me, and here I am, almost 30 years later, doing it, and it's been awesome.
All right. So continue on talking about Raven.
Yeah.
Recently I was watching a episode of Legion of Skanks, and they had Sandman on, and they talked about the Christ version of Sandman getting hung up on the crucifix and everything.
Crucifixion. Yeah.
And he was saying, like, someone said Meanie, and Steve was like, damn man, this is really fucked up. I don't think we should do this. This is a little too far. And Sandman is just like, this is great. Like, he's loving it. Were you guys like, or you were like, this is
Well,
kind of edgy?
yeah, I was, only a year and a half into the business. And I saw that episode and I saw them posted on Instagram. And God's honest truth, I posted it on the comments of the clip on Instagram of him talking about that or them talking about that. I was like, tell you the truth, I was more worried about my grandmom finding out about it, that I crucified, that it was taking place in a mock crucifixion, because my grandmom was super religious. I went to Catholic school for a couple of years, and you know, I I just went along with it, but it was still like, ooh, it was very surreal when you're lifting up the cross and putting, tying the guy to the cross and putting a barbed wire crown of thorns on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that building was pretty silent,
Oh, really?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
It went from like, woo, dude, oh.
it's like being out in space. Is there sound in here? Where'd all the sound go?
Yeah.
And then go to the back. Everybody's looking like kind of giving a side eye, and you're just like, "Ugh." But you know, hey, I was a rookie, and I really didn't have a say over it. And I was like, going into, I was like, are we really doing this? And we're doing it. Even while we are doing it, I was like, are we really doing this? And yeah, I was like, yeah, God, truth be told, I was more worried about my grandmom finding out about it, but she didn't really watch wrestling anyway. I mean, she watched back in the day, and she would watch with me, but I don't think she knew to put on ECW to watch it. But thankfully, it didn't air anyway. So going into it, I was like, ooh, my grandma's gonna beat my ass, you know.
I can imagine.
Yeah, she passed away in 2000. I'm still scared of her.
Oof.
But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. As the saying goes, the things we do.
Mm.
So my next question for you is from ECW to all the independent wrestling and WWE, which is your favorite match you've done? Which
Hold on. What was that last part? What my favorite match? That what?
Would your favorite wrestler from the Indies, ECW, or
Oh,
WWE?
favorite wrestler. Man, there's so
A
many.
match you were in.
I mean, every night working with Tracy Smothers was a night off. Like as we say in the business, it was a night off. Got to work with the FBI every night. And Tracy Smothers taught me so much. I trained with Al when I broke in. He's my initial trainer, and then Al would have me work with other veterans to learn. But I started doing shows in Indiana for a guy named Mike Samples every Thursday, and on those shows would be Ricky Morton, Tracy Smothers, and a few other people. So I go to ECW and Tracy Smothers shows up, and then we start doing the BWO versus FBI, and it just seemed like a natural feud, and like working with him every night, him and Guido every night, and with Tommy Rich as their manager, you know, you had no choice but to learn, but you also had a lot of fun. And I came out of those matches looking better than going in just because Tracy Smothers was the ultimate, professional. And Tracy Smothers gave more to the wrestling business than he ever got back, and you know, anytime I get a chance to, praise a guy like, Tracy Smothers and Sabu and Al Snow, those guys, really helped me in my career. I'll do it. So yeah, favorite opponent would have to be Tracy Smothers, just for the fact that, you know, he could have easily just, you know,
Not give you the rub type of deal.
no, just put me in there's, guys who go in there and they just want to go in, make their money and get out, you know?
Yeah.
I wrestled first year in the business, I'm wrestling this guy. He's like, kid, the more money they pay me, the more I bump. And they're not really paying me that much tonight. So I was like, oh, well. That was the wrong lesson to teach, where,
Right.
I've been on shows with Sabu and, you know, the promoter didn't draw that well. So, Sabu's going out there and killing himself in front of, these smaller crowds. But like, doesn't matter if there's one fan or 100, you go out there and give 100% because that one fan could go tell his friends, dude, I just saw the greatest show. You got to come join me, So,
Hmm.
Tracy was that guy, it didn't matter who was in the building, if it was one fan or a million, he still went out there and gave 1,000,000%, 100%, and, I learned that, that from him. I learned that from Sabu. I learned that from Al Snow. And yeah, to have, Tracy as not only opponent, but a mentor, I have fond memories.
Wow. What's up? I know Tracy Smothers from like JCW, and then when the one night stand thing, he was there. I was like, oh, what? I didn't know he was eating part of the ECW.
Yeah.
Well,
With
then I
Jeff.
go read back, and I'm like, oh, I see it now.
Yep.
But one question is, so because you wrestling in a bunch of rings, would you say the ECW ring ropes were a little more tighter than the WWF ropes slash E now? What would you like prefer ring ropes that you worked in? Like, what were your favorites?
The ECW ring was, your usual 18 by 18-foot ring, and the ropes were made out of cable. It was cable. It's basically cable wrapped in uh, garden hose. Lack of a better term, garden hose just taped up.
Yep.
And WWE is their rings are 20 by 20, and they use real rope. And there was a little bit of a learning curve when I went from, most indies, they use the cable ropes as well. And some rings are good. Some feel like you're bumping on concrete. ECW's ring, they in the beginning they rented their rings, but then they eventually went and bought their own ring, which was perfect. From 97, maybe late 96, right before the pay-per-view, they went and got their own ring. It was the perfect ring. You hit and it's just that good feeling, the ropes, you know, you had no choice but to fly off of them. So if I had my choice, I always preferred like those 18 by 18 rings with the steel cables because I could go in an ECW ring and go do the moonsault, and the cable gives me a little bit more oomph on the flip on the rotation. I had to learn going to WWE. You know, uh, you're taking a couple more extra steps, rope to rope. And then like once you're at, depending on who put the ring together, sometimes those ropes are like super loose. If you watch like early 80s WWF, like say from the Garden, people are hitting the ropes,
Hmm.
they're just like bouncing around like noodles, like or rubber bands. It's like, oof. But I went there and I went there. The ropes were a little bit, looser. It took me a little bit to get used to, especially going up to do the moonsault. But you know, any true professional, works with the tools he's given. So, but like if I had to, 100% say which I prefer, that ECW ring was perfect. It was a steel ring, 18 by 18 with, cable ropes. I've been in rings that are made out completely of wood, the frame and the boards and all that stuff. I've been in every kind of ring except for maybe the six-sided ring. I've never done one of those, but, um, yeah, if I had my druthers, I would totally pick, the ECW ring over anything else.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Now, this question is nothing wrestling related. What is the most, what would be one song that any fan that would end up playing on your music playlist?
What song would anybody put on my wrestling play?
No, song would be shocking all your fans of what band and song on your music playlist?
Man, that's a great question because, some days it's Slayer and some days it's yacht rock, it just depends on my mood, you know. You know, I've been listening to a lot of 80s stuff, I did a podcast with JBL Bradshaw and Joe Briscoe have a podcast called Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw, and they just had me come on there, and we interviewed Jack Hughes from the band Wang Chung. So like lately, I've been listening to a lot of Wang Chung and just like listen to 80s music. But then again, I just went to Metallica, rocked out to Metallica. In September, I'm going to the Slayer show in Hershey.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
so I can't pick just one song. But it depends on my mood. You
Yeah.
know, depends on what I wake up. I wake up feel a little sore, a little cranky. My knees sound like Rice Krispies. Snap, crackle, and pop.
Yeah.
You know, the other night I was driving and I had Our Lady Peace on repeat. Just listen to that playlist. All right, there's like I'll find a '90s playlist on Pandora and just listen to that all day, or I'll listen to an '80s mix, or music is just therapy for me. Just depending on what mood I'm in. If I need a little bit more motivation, I'll listen to the heavy stuff, Metallica, Pantera, Alice in Chains. If I need to just chill the hell out, yeah, I'll throw in some yacht rock and see where it goes. But if I had to pick one song that people would be surprised, man. That's a good question. Basically with this answer, I've been stalling. Trying to think of oh man. I'll
It's
say,
usually, I will say, it's usually the one that no one ever expects to
Yeah.
have on a playlist. That's the most funniest ones.
yeah, I'll take. Let's do Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. Because the Foo Fighters did an amazing cover of it,
Yes.
and B, there was a period of time in ECW. Like one time when I was in the ECW locker room, just before a show, just hanging out. I'm all geared up and just doing whatever. Corner of my side, I hear Sandman fucking singing Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. I'm just like, so I learned that like if you just go up to fucking Sandman and start singing a couple lines from Baker Street, like why on your way down the Baker Street, and he hears it, he'll be like, he'll have to complete that song. just start singing it. So, Jerry Rafferty, I forgot he was in the band Steelers Wheels, and they had that song Stuck in the Middle with You. But
Oh,
I'm a big fan of the old Art Bell radio show too, and the music they would use to, go in and out commercials, bumper music. They used a lot of like Jerry Rafferty stuff. So, that song, brings back a lot of memories to my childhood. Growing up in Atlantic City, you go on the boardwalk and every, pier would have like music playing, and you'd always hear that song. And so it takes me back to that time. There's like TV shows, Channel 6 in Philly, we do the $1 Million Movie on, Sunday nights, and they always play Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. Just that opening, saxophone, like. So, if I had to pick one song, it would probably be that. I could put Jerry Rafferty on and just mellow out and just, relax. It soothes me.
in the same way with the minute I go on my break at work, I just pop in my headphones, put podcast on. I'm like, just that breathing second, like, silence in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. When I'm driving, I'll just, connect my phone to the stereo and throw on, Pandora or Sirius, 80s on 8, or some days it's Lithium, or some days, it's Ozzy's Boneyard,
Yep.
Depends on the day, really.
Me,
Very
I just started listening to your podcast, Mind of the Meanie.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
the whole reason. And people always told me to do a podcast, and I was like, literally, I could talk about anything. And we go into that show with no structure, just like he says, "Meanie, what's on your mind?" And I just start talking, and then, last night we did our episode, and we finished it. We're like, we literally went into that podcast with nothing to talk about and talked about everything. So there's an art to having a conversation, where I think a lot of it gets lost in social media, because everybody's staring at their phone and they're scroll. I see something I like, I read it. If I don't like it, I scroll it. And sometimes nowadays you talk to anybody and you're talking to them, and you see in their head that they're waiting for you to finish the thing because they have something to say. It's just like if they could talk over you, they would. And I think that's there's benefits to social media, and then there's downfalls to social media. And I think social media kind of kills the art of having a conversation, where if somebody doesn't agree with you, you just yell at them and argue with them. It's like, dude, we're talking about ice cream. What are you yelling about? Just, it could be anything, but, yeah, that's what I love about the having a podcast, just being able to talk about whatever.
It's pretty much how we are. We
Yes.
kind of like we have music. Like I talk a lot about music. Chris talks about wrestling, and we
Yep.
just talk the day-to-day bullshit that we have to deal with our lives. It's honestly the best way to vent.
But yeah, it could be very
Yep.
therapeutic.
Yes, it is.
But I do have to ask, because you worked in ECW,
Mhm.
what was like your worst bump you took, and like you just like you took you like, oh no type of deal.
Maybe the early days of ECW, where, they rented the rings, and, sometimes, the people who have those rings, during the course of a week, we rent them out to somebody else as well. So, there's one time we had a ring at the ECW arena, and the canvas, I don't know if it was just the boards in the ring were like a little loose or whatever, but I took the Pitbulls had this move called the Super Bomb, which is basically a power bomb, like Pitbull Gary, one with hair was still on the top rope. Anthony would, pick me up for like an atomic drop, but feed me up into Gary, and Gary would stand up and power bomb me from the second rope. And I want to say, not only was that like a rough bump, that was like a very unnerving bump, because I'm up and I'm looking out into the crowd, and all of a sudden they're disappearing. I'm going back and land. And the one time they gave it to me a few times, and it was fine, like as unnerving as it was. But whatever reason, this one ECW arena show, I hit, and there must have been like a loose board or something. It just got me right in the back. And after the shows, we all went back to the hotel. even though I live in Philly, I would go back in the hotel to be social and hang out, and they would do promos at the hotel, way into the morning. And I went up to, to the hotel, and I literally went to, lean over and tie my shoes, and I couldn't even lean over to tie my shoes because my back was just so jacked up. But, as far as bumps in ECW, that's probably the toughest one I ever had to take, and then, once they got the new ring, everything was sweet, but
Yeah.
those early days, up until, before they got their own set of rings, those rings were a little bit of a wild card, you know. And one time there was even an issue where some of the boys were pissed off about the condition of the ring that they were using that night, and they had a meeting with the ring crew guy and set them straight. But just a wrestling ring is our lack of a better term, our canvas. We are the artists. That's our canvas, and
Mhm.
you got to treat it with respect. And when you go into a ring and the ring is like horrible, just you know I'm sure there's points in my life now that where if I have a random pain in my back, it's probably due to that one bump I took in ECW that just totally wrecked me. There was a time when I was training, before I got into ECW, I was on a show in Michigan, and I took an arm drag, and there's like a space between the padding, and my elbow went in between the padding, and just my elbow blew up.
Ooh.
I still swear, every to this day, that one jam in my elbow in between the padding and hitting the boards just wrecked my elbow. So, but there's no bump is a good bump,
Yeah.
because they add up,
Yeah.
and people are like, "Oh, you still wrestle?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm very selective now because you know my body doesn't heal like it used to, so I gotta be smart. I gotta work smart." And yeah, I think back to that bump, and I was like, "Man, that bump probably took a couple years off my career."
Yeah. So, my next question: where would you have to be? Say, which state for a show would be the most craziest fans of all?
That's really hard to answer too, man. Philly is, you know,
Rabid.
oh yeah, Rabbit, but there's other cities that are close. You know, uh, I love wrestling. I always put Philly number one, but
Yeah.
but then you go up to Queens at the Elks Lodge, those fans are crazy, and then you go to Pittsburgh, you know, those fans were pretty lively as well. But after Philadelphia, Queens, and Pittsburgh, Buffalo, New York was pretty good. Um, Buffalo stood out so much that like I even when I think about sporting, it's weird. Like I'll root for like my I'm a diehard Philadelphia sports fan, but like I love sports too. So like I'll root for the Eagles all day, and but like I'll have secondary teams say I'll watch because I wrestled there. Buffalo's one of those towns where like if it doesn't negatively impact the Eagles, like I'll root for Buffalo just because I remember how awesome that town was when I wrestled there, rabid fans. And I think the whole, connection between, Philly, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and, Queens, it's just blue collar towns, hard,
True.
hard working people. People, lunchbox, sandwich in a lunchbox, going to their job, busting their knuckles. And at the end of the day, they just want to be entertained and forget about their everyday life. That's what our job is as, professional wrestlers. We're there to help people forget about, oh, I'm behind on rent. I got a doctor's appointment. I got this, that, whatever's going on in your life, you can watch a wrestling show and forget about the world in that hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. And you know, Buffalo's definitely one of those towns. They're Buffalo and Philly are like kindred spirits. So
Hmm.
you know, um, I would definitely have to say Buffalo. After
Damn.
after Philly. After Philly.
I lived in
Yes.
Buffalo for a year, so that kind of makes me feel pretty nice. I'm like, nice.
Buffalo's a good town, man. I went to Eagles Bills game, and unfortunately the weather was horrible. It was
Snowstorm or rainstorm?
rain. It was raining
Oh,
sideways, and I wanted the Buffalo experience, but people weren't tailgating, and it's like we basically got out of the car and went into the stadium, and then really, it's raining sideways, and you're just getting soaked. And I guess the cool thing about the game was Joey Belladonna from Anthrax sang the national anthem. We're like, oh, that's pretty cool,
that is cool.
but the Eagles won, which is cool, but I wish it could have been like a different, like even if it was a snow game, that would have been cool too. But
Yeah.
it was like right around Halloween in 2019, went to Buffalo, and that's because oh man, Buffalo's a great wrestling town. So let's go watch an Eagles game in Buffalo. That's my logic.
There you go. Do you have any like memorabilia from all your years of wrestling that you kept? Like, I'm taking this. I hope no one like noticed. Taking this as my own personal keepsake.
Let's see, right here, that this framed photo is the missing dog flyer that Al Snow put on Monday Night Raw and Sunday Night Heat when Pepper was missing, and he put Val Venus's phone number on there. It was like somebody kidnapped Pepper, and Al's on TV, and they have a Polaroid of Pepper, and they do a bunch of they write on there missing dog, blah blah blah, call this number. And on Sunday night, he puts up the flyer, and Val Venus got a couple calls that night, but when he put it up on Monday Night Raw, Val Venus's phone blew up, and there was like a stack of the flyers there, and I was like, "Oh, I'm taking one of those." I took that. Um, Somewhere in my house, I have a poster that was on the wall. I was in the movie The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, and it had a bunch of fake event posters on the wall. And I snagged one of those. So there's one of those in my house somewhere.
Nice.
I
Memorabilia.
did actually see you in the movie The Wrestler.
Yeah, if you
I think,
blink, you miss me. But
yeah.
you see, I got a thing really. Well, it's memorabilia, but it's nothing worth saying I stole because it was mine. Uh, my ticket to the Terry Funk banquet the night before ECW Barely Legal. We had to, Terry Funk's banquet on one of his first, retirements. So let me put that back in there before I ruin it.
Yes.
But yeah,
That's pretty cool.
I got stuff around. Just off the top of my head, probably that Pepper flyer for when Pepper was a missing dog.
Yeah.
I went on TV and played a practical joke on Val Venus by putting his number on national TV.
Yes. But yeah, so we're coming close to the end of the time being and all that. We got 10 minutes left. Would you like
World, what
to
the hell? Oh, I'm just kidding.
uh,
It's the end of
uh,
the world, folks.
yes. Would you like to mention your podcast and all that to who's ever listening to the shows if they want to know about it and all that?
Yeah, man. Mind of the Meanie podcast, which I do, it drops every Monday, wherever your favorite podcast. We talk about everything. We talk about music, movies, sports, tons of useless knowledge. That drops every Monday. And another podcast I do is for ad-free shows called Mornings with Meanie, which I did, right before I hopped on here. We just talk about the week's events, and have a lively chat with the people in the chat, and that's what I love about wrestling. I grew up a fan, and love talking about pro wrestling. And when I was a kid, finding other pro wrestling fans was like it was like Fight Club. You just you saw each other out in the pile with the shirt and, give a little nod like, hey, hey, hey.
Yeah.
But now it's everybody's a fan and there's social media and that's that. In my school, I was the wrestling guy, I had the shirts, I had everything. And, if anybody wanted to know everything about wrestling, they came to me. Like I was the expert. And then, once I learned about the newsletters and Dave Meltzer and all that stuff, I would like read the newsletter. I'm like, I have a feeling the British Bulldogs are going to win the tag belts this week. I don't know why. And then people who didn't read the sheets would be like, man, you must really know about wrestling. I was like, well. But I don't even know what made me go down that road. But yeah, that's me on Mind of the Meanie. Talk about
Yep.
anything. Mind of the Meanie drops every Monday morning, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Mornings with Meanie on ad-free shows every Saturday morning. Every now and then we got to do a random show depending on if I'm traveling. If you would like to support the Blue Meanie, go to prowrestlingtees.com/Blue Meanie. Get yourself, everybody likes to wear those old school BWO shirts. And, just that's it. I'm busy with Mind of the Meanie. I'm busy with Mornings with Meanie. I got my shirt store going and doing a whole bunch of different stuff. I got video games coming out,
Mhm.
just, staying busy, which is cool,
Yes. That
That's
is
the only
good.
thing to mainly do.
Yep.
But
There's-
all right, Chris, you ready to say goodbye to the lovely
Yes.
people and everything else? So, Meanie, thank you so much for coming on. We truly appreciate it. We can't wait to see you on the 14th and everything.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you
Yes.
guys, man. It's going to be a great event. Looking forward to it going up, seeing some
Yes.
family and then seeing my family and then seeing my wrestling family. So
Yes.
it'll be great.
All right. Well, Chris, you got anything to say before we sign off?
All I gotta say is, if you don't know who the Meanie is, you are too young. Learn up on your history.
Yeah, right, kid. All right. We'll catch you all next week here on Digital Dudes. Y'all have a good night. Peace.
Peace.